Hare Krishna everyone, welcome back to the reading of Dialectic Spiritualism, a Vedic view on Western philosophy by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So we're continuing chapter number 15 entitled Carl Jung. Disciple. Concerning the soul, Jung further wrote, quote, I can only gaze with wonder and awe at the depths and heights of our psychic nature. Its non-spatial universe conceals an untold abundance of images which have accumulated over millions of years. Unquote. Srila Prabhupada. Since we are constantly changing our bodies, constantly undergoing transmigration, we are accumulating various experiences. However, if we remain fixed in Krishna consciousness, we do not change. There is none of this fluctuation once we understand our real identity, which is, quote, I am the servant of Krishna. My duty is to serve him. Unquote. Arjuna realized this after hearing the Bhagavad Gita, and he told Shri Krishna, Nashta moha smritirlabdha tvat prasadan maya chuta sthitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. Quote, my dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy. I am now firm and free from doubt and am prepared to act according to your instructions. Unquote. Bhagavad Gita 18.73. So after hearing the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna comes to this conclusion, and his illusion is dispelled by Krishna's mercy. Arjuna is then fixed in his original position. And what is this? Karishye vachanam tava. Quote, whatever you say, I shall do. Unquote. At the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna told Arjuna to fight, and Arjuna refused. At the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's illusion is dispelled, and he is situated in his original constitutional position. Thus, our perfection lies in executing the orders of Krishna. Disciple. Jung noted that the world's religions speak of 5 different types of rebirth. One is I was thinking metamorphosis, but this is metempsychosis, the transmigration of the souls, and according to this view, quote, one's life is prolonged in time by passing through different bodily existences. Or from another point of view, it is a life sequence interrupted by different reincarnations. It is by no means certain whether continuity of personality is guaranteed or not. There may be only a continuity in karma. Unquote. Srila Prabhupada. A personality is always there, and bodily changes do not affect it. However, one identifies himself according to his body. For instance, when the soul is within the body of a dog, he thinks according to that particular bodily construction. He thinks, I am a dog and I have my particular activities. in human society the same conception is there. For instance, when one is born in America, he thinks, I am an American and I have my duty. According to the body, the personality is manifest, but in all cases, personality is there. Disciple: but is this personality continuous? Srila Prabhupada: certainly the personality is continuous. At death, the soul passes into another gross body along with its mental and intellectual identifications. The individual acquires different types of bodies, but the person is the same. Disciple: this would correspond to the second type of rebirth, which is reincarnation. Jung wrote, quote, this concept of rebirth necessarily implies the continuity of personality. Here, the human personality is regarded as continuous and accessible to memory, so that when one is incarnated or born, one is able, at least potentially, to remember that one has lived through previous existences and that these existences were one's own. That is, that they had the same ego form as the present body. As a rule, reincarnation means rebirth into a human body. Unquote. Srila Prabhupada: not necessarily into a human body. From Srimad Bhagavatam, we learn that Bharat Maharaj became a deer in his next life. The soul is changing bodies just as a man changes his clothes. The man is the same, although his clothes may be different. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grinati naroparani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Quote, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Unquote. Bhagavad Gita 2.22. When a coat is old and cannot be used anymore, one has to purchase another. The man is the same, but his clothes are supposed according to the price he can pay. Similarly, you purchase a new body with the money, karma, you have accumulated throughout your lifetime. According to your karma, you receive a certain type of body. Disciple: the third type of rebirth is called resurrection, and Jung notes that there are two types. Quote, it may be a carnal body, as in the Christian assumption that this body will be resurrected. Unquote. According to the Christian doctrine, at the end of the world, the gross bodies will reassemble themselves and ascend into heaven or descend into hell. What? This is why they put them into this clothes and into the how do you call it, grave, like this whole conception of graveyard and like wooden boxes, like this is where it comes from. Oh, goodness me. Srila Prabhupada, this is simply foolishness. This is simply foolishness. The gross material body can never be resurrected. At the time of death, the living entity leaves this material body, and the material body disintegrates. How can the material elements reassemble themselves? In Bhagavatam, many descriptions are there when a very advanced yogi or great devotee, he would leave his body and go back to the spiritual world. The body is described to, like, the air mixes with the air, fire into fire, water into water, and earth mixes with earth, because our body consists of these 5 elements. So the body just mixes with the elements, although traditionally best it would be burned, of course. Okay, side topic. Disciple. Young further wrote that on a higher level, resurrection is no longer understood in a gross material sense. Quote, "It is assumed that the resurrection of the dead is the rising up of the corpus glorificationis, the subtle body, in the state of incorruptibility." Unquote. Srila Prabhupada. This type of resurrection is applicable only to God and His representatives, not to others. In this case, it is not a material body that is raised up, but a spiritual one. When God appears, He appears in a spiritual body, and this body does not change. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he spoke to the sun god millions of years ago, and Arjuna questions how this could be possible. Krishna replies that although Arjuna had been present, he could not remember. It is possible for one to remember only if one does not change bodies. Changing bodies means forgetting. But the Lord's body is purely spiritual, and the spiritual body never changes. According to the Mayavadi conception, the absolute truth is impersonal, and when it appears as a person, it accepts a material body. But those who are advanced in spiritual knowledge, who accept the Bhagavad Gita, understand that this is not the case. Krishna specifically says, "Avajananti mammudha manushim tanum ashritam." Quote, "Because I appear as a human being, the unintelligent think that I am nothing but a human being." Unquote. Bhagavad Gita 9.11. This is not the case. Impersonalists have no knowledge of the spiritual body. Disciple. The fourth form of rebirth is called renovation, and this applies to, quote, "the transformation of a mortal into an immortal being, of a corporeal into a spiritual being, and of a human being into a divine being." Well-known prototypes of this change are the transfiguration and ascension of Christ, and the bodily assumption of the Mother of God into heaven after her birth. Srila Prabhupada. We say that the spiritual body never dies, but that the material body is subject to destruction. Nahanyate hanyamane sharirei. The material body is subject to destruction, but after its destruction, the spiritual body is still there. the spiritual body is neither generated nor killed. Disciple: but aren't there several examples in the Srimad Bhagavatam of a kind of ascension into heaven? Didn't Arjuna ascend? Srila Prabhupada: yes, and Yudhishthir. There are many instances, especially Krishna himself and his associates. But we should never consider their bodies material. They didn't go through death of any sort, although their bodies traveled to the higher universe. But it is also a fact that everyone possesses a spiritual body. We will read the last type of rebirth. Disciple: the fifth type of rebirth is indirect and is called participation in the process of transmigration. Examples of this type may be the initiation ceremony or the twice-born ceremony of the Brahmana. In other words, Jung wrote, quote, "One has to witness or take part in some rite of transformation, a rite of transformation. This rite may be a ceremony. Through his presence at the rite, the individual participates in divine grace." Unquote. Srila Prabhupada: yes, one's first birth is by one's father and mother, and the next birth is by the spiritual master and the Vedic knowledge. When one takes his second birth, he comes to understand that he is not the material body. This is spiritual education. That birth of knowledge, or birth into knowledge, is called Dvija, second birth. Okay, tomorrow we shall continue this chapter. Tomorrow we shall conclude this chapter, most probably. Yes, we will discuss what Carl Jung wrote in one of his last books, The Undiscovered Self. So, thank you so much for tuning in today. The link to this book is in the description. Please check out our website, shravanamdiaries.com. You will find the books, the episodes, the links, and so many other things. Few other things. So yeah, we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.